The American approach to international education, particularly concerning China, took a sharp turn this week. On Wednesday, May 28, 2025, Secretary of State Marco Rubio made a significant announcement. He declared that the United States would begin to aggressively revoke visas for Chinese students. This policy marks a considerable escalation in how the U.S. handles its academic relationship with China. The primary targets are students with perceived ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Students studying in fields deemed sensitive or critical to national security are also under scrutiny. This move signals a more confrontational stance from the current administration. The announcement did not emerge from a vacuum. It is part of a broader pattern of policies under the Trump administration. These policies aim to address perceived national security threats emanating from China, especially through academic channels. The administration views certain areas of academic collaboration and student exchange as potential avenues for intellectual property theft or undue influence. Therefore, this visa revocation strategy is presented as a necessary measure to safeguard American interests. The administration believes that a more robust screening process is essential to protect sensitive research and technology from falling into the wrong hands. Implementing this new directive will involve a coordinated effort across government agencies. The U.S. State Department is set to collaborate closely with the Department of Homeland Security. Together, they will oversee the process of identifying and revoking existing visas. Furthermore, the criteria for future visa applications from students in the People's Republic of China and Hong Kong will undergo significant revision. The goal is to implement enhanced scrutiny at the application stage, making it more difficult for individuals deemed a risk to obtain U.S. student visas. This preemptive approach reflects a deep suspicion about the intentions of some students. The news of this policy shift was not universally anticipated within the government itself. Some U.S. consular officials stationed abroad expressed surprise at the directive. Reports indicate that U.S. embassies had not received prior instructions or detailed briefings about this impending change. This lack of internal forewarning suggests a swift decision-making process at the highest levels. It also raises questions about the immediate preparedness of consular staff to implement such a sweeping policy. The suddenness of the announcement could lead to confusion and inconsistencies in its initial application across different consular posts. The scope of Secretary Rubio's visa revocation policy is potentially vast, causing considerable unease. While the announcement specifically mentions students with connections to the Chinese Communist Party or those in sensitive or critical fields, these categories are inherently broad. The Chinese Communist Party is an enormous organization boasting approximately 99 million members. Given its pervasive presence in Chinese society, establishing a clear line between an individual student and the party can be challenging. Many aspects of life in China, including education and career advancement, can involve some level of interaction or affiliation with party-linked organizations, even if not direct membership. The term sensitive or critical fields also lacks precise definition in the initial announcement. This ambiguity leaves much room for interpretation and could affect students across a wide range of disciplines, from advanced sciences and engineering to certain areas of social sciences or even business. Without clear guidelines, students might find themselves unexpectedly targeted. The lack of specificity regarding how many students would ultimately be affected adds to the uncertainty. This open-endedness has fueled anxiety among the current population of Chinese students in the United States, who now face an unpredictable future regarding their academic pursuits and legal status. Rosie Levine, the executive director of the U.S.-China Education Trust, highlighted the potential for the policy to impact nearly every Chinese student. She pointed out that the sheer size of the CCP means that indirect affiliations, such as family members being party members or participation in party-affiliated youth groups, could become grounds for scrutiny. This enormous chilling effect, as she described it, might deter future students from even considering the U.S. for their education. The fear of arbitrary visa revocation or denial could redirect a significant flow of academic talent away from American institutions, regardless of any individual's actual intentions or affiliations. Moreover, the policy's reach could extend to students from Hong Kong, as the announcement specified revised criteria for applicants from both mainland China and the Special Administrative Region. This inclusion is noteworthy given Hong Kong's traditionally distinct academic and legal systems, which have been undergoing significant changes. The policy could be interpreted as a further signal of the US viewing Hong Kong as increasingly indistinguishable from mainland China in terms of security concerns. The broad strokes of the policy, therefore, risk encompassing a diverse group of students, many of whom may have no direct involvement in activities that pose a genuine threat to US national security. The announcement by Secretary Rubio was met with immediate and pointed criticism from academic leaders and policy experts. A primary concern revolves around the policy's inherent vagueness. Mary Gallagher, Dean of the Keough School of Global Affairs at Notre Dame University, described the policy's boundaries as too broad and too undefined. This lack of clarity, she argued, creates a fertile ground for inconsistent application and potential injustice. Students might be penalized based on loose associations or interpretations of sensitive fields, rather than concrete evidence of wrongdoing or genuine security threats. Such ambiguity undermines the principles of due process and fairness. Critics also fear that the policy's broad brushstrokes could inadvertently harm U.S. interests. Dean Gallagher warned that it could severely damage U.S.-China educational exchange, a relationship that, despite its complexities, has fostered valuable academic and cultural connections for decades. More critically, she suggested it could negatively impact U.S. science and technological competitiveness. Many Chinese students contribute significantly to research and development in American universities, particularly in STEM fields. Disrupting this flow of talent without a precise and well-founded rationale could slow down American innovation and cede ground to global competitors in key technological races. The assertion that all universities in China have some CCP affiliation further complicates the policy's application. If institutional affiliation alone becomes a criterion for suspicion, then virtually any student from China could be deemed problematic. This approach fails to distinguish between institutional ties, which are often a structural reality in China's education system, and individual actions or intentions. Such a sweeping generalization risks alienating an entire generation of Chinese scholars and researchers, many of whom value academic freedom and international collaboration. It also plays into a narrative of blanket suspicion that can fuel xenophobia and racial profiling. This new policy also evokes uncomfortable memories of the Department of Justice's now defunct China Initiative. Launched during the first Trump administration, the China Initiative aimed to counter Chinese espionage and intellectual property theft, particularly within academia. However, it faced widespread accusations of racial profiling, targeting researchers of Chinese descent based on flimsy evidence, and creating a climate of fear that chilled scientific collaboration. The initiative was eventually ended due to these concerns and its perceived ineffectiveness in producing significant national security prosecutions, with many cases falling apart or resulting in acquittals, highlighting the dangers of overly broad and poorly targeted security measures. The aggressive revocation of visas for Chinese students is poised to send significant financial shockwaves through U.S. institutions of higher education. Many American universities, both public and private, have come to rely substantially on the tuition revenue generated by international students, with Chinese students often forming the largest or second largest contingent. These students typically pay full or close to full tuition fees, which helps universities balance their budgets, fund scholarships, and support various academic programs. A sudden and large-scale departure or a sharp decline in new enrollments from China would create a considerable financial hole for many institutions. This reliance on international student fees is not merely about profit, it is often a crucial mechanism for supporting domestic students. The revenue from international students frequently helps offset the cost of financial aid packages provided to American students. Therefore, a policy that drastically reduces the number of Chinese students could indirectly impact the affordability of education for U.S. citizens. Universities might be forced to make difficult choices, such as increasing tuition for domestic students, cutting programs, reducing faculty positions, or scaling back on research initiatives due to the anticipated revenue shortfall. The timing of this announcement, alongside other Trump administration measures targeting higher education, exacerbates the financial anxieties for universities. For instance, the administration recently paused interviews for new student visa applicants as it considers expanding social media screening. Furthermore, President Trump floated the idea of capping international student levels at 15% at Harvard University, an institution where foreign students comprised nearly 28% of total enrollment in the 2024 to 2025 academic year. These concurrent pressures create an environment of profound instability for university financial planning and international recruitment efforts. Moreover, the White House has already moved to freeze billions in federal funding for some top U.S. institutions, labeling them as too liberal or alleging anti-Semitism. This broader antagonism towards certain segments of higher education, combined with the specific targeting of Chinese student revenue streams, suggests a multifaceted challenge to the traditional operational and financial models of American universities. Institutions that have historically benefited from robust international student populations and federal research grants now find themselves navigating a much more precarious and politically charged landscape, forcing them to reevaluate their long-term financial strategies. Section 5. Beyond academia, broader economic tremors and innovation worries. The potential consequences of Secretary Rubio's visa revocation policy extend far beyond the ivy-covered walls of American universities, threatening to create significant economic tremors throughout the United States economy, particularly in its innovation hubs. Stephen Orlins, president of the National Committee on U.S.-China Relations, issued a stark warning about the long-term damage this policy could inflict. He argued that revoking visas for Chinese students and researchers effectively cuts off a vital pipeline of talent that has historically fueled American entrepreneurship and economic growth. Many of these students are highly skilled, especially in critical science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields. Silicon Valley and other tech-centric regions in particular have benefited immensely from the contributions of international talent, including many individuals who initially came to the United States as students from China. These individuals have gone on to found successful companies, develop cutting-edge technologies, and contribute to the overall dynamism of the U.S. tech sector. Restricting their entry or forcing their departure could lead to a brain drain, with valuable skills and innovative ideas potentially being lost to competitor nations. This could diminish the United States' ability to maintain its leading edge in global technological competition, a stated priority of the administration itself. The economic contribution of international students as a whole is substantial. During the 2023 to 2024 school year alone, international students contributed an estimated $43.8 billion to the U.S. economy. This figure encompasses tuition payments, living expenses, and other spending that supports local businesses and communities across the country. Beyond the direct financial input, these students supported nearly 400,000 jobs in the United States. A significant reduction in the number of Chinese students who form a large part of this international cohort would inevitably lead to a noticeable contraction in these economic benefits, affecting various sectors from retail and housing to transportation and services. Furthermore, the policy's chilling effect, as described by Rosie Levine, could deter not only students directly targeted, but also a broader group of talented individuals who might perceive the United States as an unwelcoming or unstable environment for study and work. This perception could have lasting repercussions, making it harder for U.S. companies and research institutions to attract the best and brightest minds from around the world. In an increasingly globalized competition for talent, policies that create barriers or foster an atmosphere of suspicion can put the United States at a distinct disadvantage, impacting its long-term economic vitality and innovative capacity. Section 6. By the numbers, Chinese students and their U.S. economic footprint. To fully grasp the potential impact of the new visa revocation policy, it is essential to look at the numbers. Approximately 277,000 Chinese students were enrolled in U.S. educational institutions last year, in 2024. This makes them the second largest group of foreign students in the country, trailing only students from India. While this figure is substantial, it already represents a decline from previous years. For instance, the peak number of Chinese students in the U.S. was around 370,000 in 2019. This prior decrease can be attributed to various factors, including the COVID-19 pandemic, existing U.S.-China tensions, and increased competition from universities in other countries. The economic contribution of these students is considerable, as noted previously. During the 2023 to 2024 academic year, The collective body of international students, of which Chinese students are a very significant part, injected approximately $43.8 billion into the U.S. economy. This financial infusion goes far beyond tuition payments. It includes spending on accommodation, food, books, travel and entertainment, benefiting local economies in college towns and large cities alike. This spending supports a wide array of American jobs, estimated at nearly 400,000 during the same period, ranging from university staff to service industry workers. The policy's criterion targeting individuals with connections to the Chinese Communist Party is particularly impactful given the party's scale. With around 99 million members in China, direct or indirect links to the CCP are commonplace. Rosie Levine of the U.S.-China Education Trust emphasized that this could potentially ensnare a vast number of students, as family members, teachers, or participation in state-sanctioned activities could be construed as a connection. This broad definition means the policy could affect a much larger portion of the 277,000 Chinese students than initially apparent, dramatically shrinking this cohort and their associated economic contributions. The focus on students in sensitive or critical fields further complicates the numerical impact. While the exact definition remains elusive, STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, are often considered critical. Chinese students are heavily represented in these graduate programs at U.S. universities, contributing vital research and filling roles that sometimes see insufficient domestic applicants. A significant reduction in their numbers would not only affect university research output, but also the pipeline of skilled workers for U.S. industries that rely on these advanced degrees. The precise numerical impact remains uncertain, but the potential for a drastic reduction is very real. Section 7. Severed Connections, the Future of U.S.-China Educational Exchange. The aggressive visa revocation policy announced by Secretary Rubio is set to cast a long shadow over the future of U.S.-China educational exchange, a domain that has, for decades, fostered mutual understanding and collaboration despite broader geopolitical tensions. This policy signals a fundamental shift away from open academic engagement towards a more suspicion-laden, security-first approach. The immediate consequence is likely to be a further decline in the number of Chinese students choosing the U.S. for their studies, building on the downward trend already observed since 2019. The fear of visa cancellations, increased scrutiny, or being unfairly targeted will undoubtedly make other countries appear as more stable and welcoming alternatives. This potential severing of educational ties carries significant long-term implications for both nations. For the United States, it means a loss of diverse perspectives in classrooms and research labs, diminishing the richness of the academic environment. It also curtails opportunities for American students and faculty to engage directly with future leaders and thinkers from China, hindering the development of nuanced understandings of a major global power. Such soft power and cultural diplomacy, often cultivated through educational exchange, are invaluable tools in international relations, and their erosion could make future diplomatic efforts more challenging and less informed. For China, while its students may find alternative destinations for education, the U.S. has long been a premier choice for access to top-tier research facilities and a vibrant innovation ecosystem. Reduced access could slow the pace of certain scientific advancements within China, or at least redirect its talent development strategies. However, it might also spur China to invest even more heavily in its domestic universities and research capabilities, aiming for greater self-sufficiency in critical fields. In the long run, a more insular Chinese academic environment could also limit its own global engagement and collaborative potential. The impact on technological collaboration and competitiveness is particularly acute. Many breakthroughs in science and technology are the result of international teamwork. Chinese researchers and students have been integral to many U.S.-led research projects. Mary Gallagher from Notre Dame University warned that policies like this could harm U.S. science and technological competitiveness precisely because they disrupt these collaborative networks. If the U.S. is perceived as closing its doors to talent from a major scientific power like China, it risks isolating itself from global innovation currents, potentially ceding leadership in emerging technologies where international cooperation is often key to rapid advancement. Section 8. The Political Arena, Lines of Support and Division. Secretary Rubio's announcement of aggressive visa revocations for Chinese students has quickly drawn lines of support and opposition within the American political landscape. reflecting broader divisions on how to approach U.S.-China relations. Supporters of the policy, primarily from the Republican Party, have lauded it as a necessary step to protect national security and prioritize American interests. Florida Senator Ashley Moody and Indiana Senator Jim Banks were among those who quickly offered their backing, framing the decision through an America First lens. They argue that the U.S. must be vigilant against potential espionage and intellectual property theft facilitated through academic channels. This sentiment was echoed by West Virginia Representative Riley Moore, who emphasized the need to counter China's growing influence and assert American strength. For these proponents, the risks associated with some Chinese students, particularly those with ties to the CCP or studying in sensitive fields, outweigh the benefits of open educational exchange. They view the policy as a direct response to perceived threats from Beijing and an overdue correction to what they see as a naive openness in the past. This perspective aligns with the Trump administration's broader strategy of confronting China more directly on multiple fronts, from trade to technology. However, the policy is not without its critics, and opposition is likely to come from various quarters, including academic institutions, civil liberties groups, and some business leaders. Concerns echo those raised during the controversial China Initiative, which was criticized for fostering a climate of fear and leading to unjust accusations against researchers of Chinese descent. Critics argue that such broad policies can lead to racial profiling and unfairly target individuals based on their national origin rather than specific evidence of wrongdoing. They advocate for more nuanced and targeted approaches to national security concerns that do not indiscriminately harm innocent students and researchers. The legislative backdrop also indicates a growing hawkishness towards China within Congress. Earlier in May 2025, the House passed legislation to deny Department of Homeland Security funding to U.S. colleges and universities that partner with Chinese academic institutions linked to Beijing's security apparatus. This legislative action suggests a bipartisan, or at least cross-factional, willingness in Congress to scrutinize and restrict academic ties with China. While the visa revocation policy is an executive action, it operates within a political environment increasingly receptive to such measures, even as debates continue about their wisdom, fairness, and long-term consequences for American interests and values. Section 9. Global ripples, geopolitical implications, and an uncertain path forward. The decision by Secretary of State Marco Rubio to aggressively revoke visas for certain Chinese students sends distinct ripples across the geopolitical landscape, signaling a further hardening of the U.S. stance towards China. This move is more than just an education policy adjustment. It is a clear statement within the broader context of strategic competition between the two global powers. It indicates that the U.S. is increasingly willing to use all available levers, including academic exchange, to counter perceived threats from Beijing. This action is likely to be viewed by China as a provocative escalation, potentially inviting retaliatory measures that could further strain an already tense relationship. China's official response, urging the U.S. to safeguard the legitimate rights and interests of international students, including those from China, was measured but firm. While the Chinese embassy in Washington did not immediately issue a detailed comment on Rubio's specific announcement, Beijing typically reacts strongly to actions it perceives as discriminatory or politically motivated against its citizens. The potential for reciprocal actions, such as making it more difficult for American students or scholars in China, or targeting U.S. educational programs operating there, cannot be discounted. This could lead to a tit-for-tat cycle that further diminishes academic and cultural interaction between the two countries. The broader implications for international norms around academic freedom and student mobility are also significant. The U.S. has long championed itself as a beacon for global talent and open inquiry. Policies that appear to restrict access based on nationality or vaguely defined political affiliations could tarnish this image and encourage other countries to adopt similar restrictive measures. This could lead to a more fragmented global academic environment, where knowledge sharing and collaboration are hindered by political considerations, ultimately slowing scientific progress and mutual understanding on a global scale. The chilling effect might not be confined to Chinese students but could extend to academics worldwide. Ultimately, the path forward is fraught with uncertainty. The immediate impact on the affected students is one of distress and disruption, as highlighted by reports of students already regretting their choice to study in the U.S. and fearing forced returns. For U.S. universities and the tech sector, the policy poses significant economic and innovation challenges. While proponents emphasize national security, critics warn of self-inflicted wounds to American competitiveness and soft power. The long-term efficacy of such a broad policy in achieving its stated security goals versus its potential to alienate a generation and undermine valuable international connections remains a subject of intense debate and concern.